Adrian Wojnarowski Woj-bombed out that Quin Snyder, his status is still up in the air, and that Quin has not agreed to a long-term agreement to be a contract extension, the head coach of the Utah Jazz. Now, we've been reporting on this back to the trade deadline, and I want to give you the latest information that we are hearing on Quin Snyder because this really is not anything new. If we're being totally honest about this situation, what Adrian Wojnarowski reported, we've been talking about this back to the trade deadline. The latest is that Quin Snyder and the Jazz have been talking, and this has been going on for over a month now since the season ended. But Quin has been hesitant to sign a contract extension. Quin Snyder, as we told you, is under contract to the Utah Jazz for this coming season. He is their head coach as of now. The issue becomes the long term with Quin Snyder. The Utah Jazz, I am told, have offered Quin a 5-year contract extension. He turned that down. They then turned around and offered him a 3-year extension, which he has not signed. He has not signed a contract extension offered by the Utah Jazz. Quin's frustration has been that he has no say or control over his roster, and that he goes back to the Dennis Lindsey relationship that he had with Dennis when Dennis was essentially the basketball czar for the Utah Jazz, where Dennis would make deals that Quin did not agree to, did not like, and did not feel like fit his coaching philosophy, which in turn has ended up having guys like Rudy Gobert under long-term contracts. And those are odd fits for Quin's coaching style. Quin wants more say over the roster. The Jazz are a little hesitant to run things by Quin as a yes or no before making a deal. You have Justin Zanuck and now Danny Ainge sitting atop the totem pole here, just beneath Ryan Smith. How many cooks do you want in the stew, right?
Yeah.
So the Jazz have been hesitant to hand Quin Snyder player personnel control, which they are not going to do. That is a deal breaker for the Utah Jazz. So they're working to try and find a compromise that works for Quin Snyder, but also works for Ryan Smith and Danny Ainge. They have yet to do that. That is why Quin Snyder has not signed a contract extension. There is a lot of belief that on top of the Dennis Lindsey situation with Quin and Dennis, you have this trade deadline situation. And I will harken back to what we talked about in late April. Quin's frustration with the trade deadline, particularly with the Joe Ingles situation and the lack of return to Quin and the lack of quality upgrades at the trade deadline, really bothered Quin Snyder. It frustrated him because he felt like he had a core group of guys that if they had gotten some additional help, not named Nickeil Alexander-Walker, that this team could have competed at least to win a series. That did not happen, and as we know now, they got their doors blown off by the Dallas Mavericks. So essentially, to kind of surmise and sum up this situation, Quin Snyder's situation is unchanged with the Jazz. He has 1 year left on his contract. They've offered him as much as 5. Currently, they have offered him 3, and he has not signed those extensions. And there is a belief in the organization that they will get something done, but there is a belief around the NBA, do not make any mistake about it, there is a belief around the NBA that Quin Snyder is going to step away from the Utah Jazz, and he will take a year off. We reported that on April 28th, and that is unchanged. NBA sources that we spoke to this morning told us that there is a significant belief that Quin Snyder will not be the head coach of the Utah Jazz this coming season by his own doing. And Jake, frankly, I would not be surprised if that was the case.
Yeah, and I think if you're the Jazz, you have to find an answer to this, relatively quickly. I mean, this is not an issue that can be, allowed to persist through the summer. I mean, for a number of reasons. You're in a time where there's a lot of change coming to the organization, and again, it's not a thing where you have to be cold-blooded with Quin or you got to be mean about it. But
That's
I think
right.
the reality of the situation is the reality of the situation doesn't allow you to have a ton of time to figure out if Quin Snyder's going to, usher this team into the future on the floor. I mean, you just have to figure that out. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you, well, he just had hip surgery. He's recovering from that. I don't buy that. I think that's an excuse. I think that, basketball guys, while they're just sitting around recovering, or maybe he's walking or whatever he's doing, you can't tell me this isn't all he's thinking about. This, to me, thinking about your future as a coach when you're an NBA head coach is basically all you would think about this time of year. So if I'm Quin Snyder, I need to make that decision and I need to make it relatively quickly. And if you're the Utah Jazz, the problem is with Quinn having 1 year, he's got 1 year left on his current deal and this extension sitting here. If he just wants to play out the string on that current deal, that puts you in kind of a precarious situation because now you've got a coach that doesn't want to be here in the long term, but you're also going to remake the roster this summer. So it's just going to come down to does Quinn want to be here or not? That's number one. Once that's decided, then the Jazz have to decide how they want to handle it. Do they want to buy Quinn out of his last year on the deal? Do they want to let him coach the last year of the deal? What do they want to do? And I think then you're going to see once those decisions are made and once that conversation is had, which again needs to happen pretty quickly here, once that's done, then you can start building a roster and have that roster catered to whoever your head coach is going to be. And that's why this Quin Snyder stuff is so important. But again, it needs to be said that just because, Woj put this out, it doesn't mean that there was some huge update on the story. This has been an ongoing thing. Again, as he just said, we've been reporting this since the 28th of April. And it continues to go on, but it needs to come to resolution, I would probably say in the next 2 weeks, maybe at the latest, because you've got a lot coming. You've got the NBA finals start tomorrow. That means they're probably going to be done in a week and a half, maybe, depending on how the series goes.
I mean, you'd love to have this done by the time the finals are over.
Yeah.
I think you certainly need to have this done by the time the NBA draft and NBA free agency get here. I mean, I would be surprised if we came back to the show on Monday and there was no update on this. Because I think it is that significant. I think you're in a situation here where when you look at Quin Snyder and you look at the impact that the head coach has on the Jazz, I mean, I think that you have to find a way to get this done with Quinn. And again, I just want to reiterate what Jake said here. Nothing has really changed. Conversations have been ongoing. But when you start talking about, what Quin Snyder is asking for, he wants input on the players that he is going to coach.
Yeah.
And I have no problem giving him that. I think when you look at Quin Snyder, the current roster does not play to his strengths or stylistically work for him. And if I'm Quin Snyder, I need change on this roster, and I need it now. Because I think Quinn realizes that he is at an age where seasons are not endless. There won't be another chance and another chance to compete for championships. As a head coach in this league, it is very difficult to build, coach, and execute a championship caliber basketball club.
Yeah.
And he knows with the Jazz that if there are changes to this roster, he may well be able to do that as long as the players that they bring in fit with his style, which is run and gun, shoot a lot of threes, and play defense. And that's not been happening over the last 2 years. And since they came out of that Denver series in the bubble, they've not been the same team.
Yeah.
They have not been able to compete at the highest levels of this league. And we've seen it the last 2 years in particular. We've seen that they simply are not athletic or talented enough to compete for a championship. And if I'm Quin Snyder, that's got to change, and it's got to change right now this offseason. So what do we continue to hear about this club? Players want change. The coach wants change.
Yeah.
The question is, does the owner have the balls to make change?
Well, and I think he does. I think the tough part, I think, for Ryan Smith, and we've had this conversation too, like I think the really tough part for Ryan Smith is that he is not a basketball guy. Like, remember Ryan Smith's story. Utah Jazz fan, grew up in Utah, tech billionaire. Like, he knows how to build a business and make a ton of money doing it. He knows how to do that. But I think that, the other side of this conversation, if you're Ryan Smith, is, hey, do I know how to handle these situations correctly? And I think that's why Danny Ainge is here. Honestly, that's why I think he brought Danny Ainge in, because they are good friends. And Danny Ainge does have a lot of experience, not just making the phone call to execute a trade or just those simple basketball ops type, behaviors, but more, hey, what does experience say? How do we handle, how do we move through this time? So, like, how do we handle the Quinn situation, and how does that situation impact the draft or lack thereof right now, frankly, for the Utah Jazz? Like, how do these things all play together?
But I think the thing that I will go back to is that sources have told me repeatedly for months since the trade deadline that there is frustration on Quin Snyder's side about the build of this roster, that there is significant belief that he will not coach this same roster next season. He will not. That is not what he wants to do. He would rather sit out the duration of his contract and then move on to another opportunity. He will not be coaching the Lakers. We know they hired Darvin Ham.
Yeah.
I think if all things being equal, and this is something you should pay attention to, if Quin Snyder does not coach the Utah Jazz this year, is this Greg Popovich's last year in San Antonio? Because I think if all things were equal and Quinn had his way, he would be the head coach of the Utah Jazz for the rest of his career. I truly believe that. I've heard that repeatedly, that Quinn has no desire necessarily to leave the Utah Jazz. What Quinn wants is the ability to coach a roster that fits his style. And if that's not going to happen in Utah, he will move on.
Yeah.
He would have no problem moving on. But I think if Quinn does not come back to coach the Jazz, keep an eye on what's going on in San Antonio. Because I do think that the Spurs would move Greg Popovich to the front office, and I think Greg would willingly do it, move to a front office role and slide Quin Snyder in as the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. I think that would absolutely happen. But I, again, want to make sure that we're all on the same page. Quin Snyder has expressed the desire to be the head coach of the Utah Jazz with the right players. And again, I know that we talk about this, it seems like, on a daily basis. I'm telling you, the guy that's the tipping point is Rudy Gobert. Because I cannot say it enough. We've said it from the day he signed that contract. Rudy Gobert is not a championship caliber player, and it's by no fault of his own. He is a 7-footer that is offensively limited, and it has a little athletic ability outside of the paint. That makes him an odd fit in today's NBA. And there are fits for him. There are teams that value Rudy Gobert. But if you are the Utah Jazz, he is the beginning and the end of your success this past season and this coming season.
Yeah.
If you trade him, your success begins. If you do not trade him, your success is on hold. I truly believe that. People I've talked to around the NBA have told me that, and I will reiterate again that the Utah Jazz have told Donovan Mitchell they are going to build around him. Quin Snyder's on board with that. The Utah Jazz have been told and have had blunt, blatant, honest conversations with Rudy Gobert about where they see him and how they view him.
Yeah.
And Rudy Gobert has told them, if there is a deal to be made and I can be moved on, feel free to make that deal. I do not want to. Rudy has straight up told Ryan Smith and Danny Ainge, I am not looking for an out. I am not trying to leave Utah. But if that deal exists, I am on board with moving to another club.
Yeah.
I am telling you now, their priority is to trade Rudy Gobert's contract. Their priority is to build around Donovan Mitchell. And I firmly believe, from what I've been told just repeatedly over the last weeks and months, the Utah Jazz want Quin Snyder to be their head coach moving forward. They offered him a 5-year deal that he did not sign. He currently has a 3-year contract extension sitting on the table that he has not signed because he wants language put into those deals that gives him some leverage over the roster. And Ryan Smith and Danny Ainge have been hesitant to do that.
Yeah, and look, I get it. I get it. Like I understand that Danny and Ryan want ultimate control. I understand that, but again, this is kind of what I was getting to.
See, I'd be careful with that though. Not ultimate control.
Well, final say. Then I mean, you're
what they don't want, in my opinion. I'm not saying you're wrong, but what they don't want is to say, okay, well, we want this particular player. What they don't want to have happen is we're going to make a trade for this particular player and Quin Snyder be off the reservation on it and say, well, I'm not going to coach that guy.
Well, but this is the thing, and so this is what I mean, like with Ryan Smith. This is kind of my point. This is Ryan Smith's first foray into these type of situations where you have a head coach who is relatively unhappy with the current roster and has some expectations about what he's going to need if he's going to stay. And that's why I say finding that balance. You know, you're not, the Utah Jazz are not in a position to say to Quin Snyder, okay, we're going to go and build this roster for you, and it's going to be, maybe not 100% what you want it to be, but like 95%. They're not in that position right now. They're in the position of, hey, right now we have to just change this roster to allow us to get in a position to bolster the roster. That's the position they're in. And so that's why I say, like, when we're talking about retaining Quin Snyder long term, what does that conversation look like? Because I'm here to tell you what that looks like is selling Quin Snyder on the idea that this is going to be a pain train of a next season, and then that following season is when you're going to start winning again. That's what I think Quin isn't really interested in, and that's why I personally, in my opinion, believe that's why he has willingness to sit out the last year of his deal, because he doesn't want to be part of that process.
But I also think that this brings in that conversation about All-Stars and the All-Star game being here on, by the way, my birthday, February 19th.
Yeah.
The NBA All-Star game is February 19th, 2023. The NBA trade deadline, I believe, is March 25th, 2023. And there is some belief, and I'm told by Jazz sources it's not true, that the Jazz will not make roster moves because they believe Donovan and Rudy will be All-Stars again.
I just don't buy that.
I don't buy that,
dude,
at all. And I have made requests to talk to Ryan Smith. They have gone unanswered. The Jazz have not declined them. They have gone unanswered. But one of the questions that we have not heard answered, and unfortunately Ryan was on a podcast last week and it was not asked or answered. I don't believe that it is true that they are saying that they're not going to trade Rudy or make significant changes because they need 2 All-Stars. Yeah. What I'm telling you is that if that philosophy is at all realistic, I think it's a huge mistake. And I bring up those 2 dates because the NBA All-Star game is February 19th. The trade deadline is March 25th. I can see a scenario where they make a significant deal at the deadline after the All-Star game. It's plausible. I think Ryan Smith would like to have multiple Utah Jazz players in that All-Star game, and there's a lot of pressure on Danny Ainge to go and get an All-Star this summer.
Yeah.
That's what I think the likely scenario is.
I don't disagree that there's possibilities that they could approach it that way, but that just sends the message you're not prioritizing winning. That's the problem with that. It sends the message that you care about vanity over actually winning championships. And Ryan Smith has not ever come off of the messaging that he's here to win championships. And he said on that very podcast that he takes seriously the legacy that the Millers left behind and carrying that legacy into the future in a successful fashion. And so that's why I say, like, yeah, sure, there's possibilities. Absolutely. I mean, you could definitely handle it that way, but I just can't for the life of me believe that they're saying to themselves, well, we're hosting the All-Star game, so that means we have to have those 2 guys in the game and then we'll move them. That's just not realistic. And frankly, I would even, in my opinion, I would go as far as to say that would be a waste of Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck's time, because there's opportunity now coming up after the finals are over. And again, the Utah Jazz are not in a position to be wasting opportunity.
Well, and I think the other thing that has earned some spot on this show is this idea of discipline in this locker room. And I think Quin Snyder is a player's coach. There's no question about that. I think Quin Snyder's a guy that would love on a nightly basis to play 9-10 guys, but he doesn't have that depth on this roster. He has not had that depth on this roster for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And when I look at Joe Ingles' injury, the one thing that did is it shortened his bench a little bit. I look in the Dallas series and I see Rudy Gay was not played a single minute. And I say to myself, well, there's a reason for that, right? So there is this idea that Quin Snyder won't play young guys. I think there's a lot of coaches around this league that don't like playing young guys. And from what we saw in Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I think he had one notable performance in a Jazz uniform.
Yeah.
I don't think that earns you time in the Dallas series. I look at the roster that Quin has. I don't think it's at all a fit the way that he wants to play. So I think it makes things very difficult when you want your coach to maybe play younger guys, and from what I understand, nobody tells Quin Snyder what rotations to use. Quin has full autonomy over the players that are, once the players are given to him, what players get minutes. Those minutes are 100% in the control of Quin Snyder. There are conversations, obviously. There are, hey, trying this, doing that. Hey, what was your thought here? Hey, what do you think about this? Like, those conversations happen on a regular basis. Quin Snyder has the final decision on who plays and when they play. And I don't think that's going to change. So when you look at this roster and the reasons for or against playing guys, I have no problem with the way that Quin Snyder used his young guys this year, because I am, again, going to tell you that I would like to have seen Jared Butler. He is the one guy that I say they mishandled this year. Send Jared Butler to the G League for a month and then bring the guy up. And when you bring him up, play him significant minutes. Playing him 3-4 minutes in trash time is not how you develop a guy. And you practice so little in this league anymore that practice time isn't where you develop guys.
Yeah.
Guys like Jared Butler need minutes. Whether that's at the G League level or the NBA level, great. But let's be brutally honest about Jared Butler. When he got his time with the Jazz, he was not stellar. There were a lot of times where he looked like he was swimming in the deep end. And you need him to be confident. He has to be your best player on the Summer League this year. Jared Butler in Salt Lake and in Las Vegas has to be your best player.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. And if he's not, that's going to create problems for this team.
Yeah.
So when I sit here and I tell you, hey, his bench is a problem, his bench was a problem. His best bench player 2 years ago was George Niang. That was his answer. After your top 6 guys, because every club has 6 guys, right? Like if you look around this league, the teams of note, I should say, the playoff teams in this league generally have 6 guys, right? Below the 6 guys, for the last 2 years, was Joe Ingles really one of your top 6 guys?
Not last year.
No, he wasn't. Not 2 years ago.
Yeah.
He wasn't really. Because remember, what happened 2 years ago? Jordan Clarkson was your 6th man of the year. Joe Ingles was 7th or 8th coming off the bench, right? Depending on the situations and whatnot.
Yeah.
Joe Ingles occasionally started. Joe Ingles wasn't a top 6 guy the last 2 years. You've got 6 guys that you play on a regular basis. Jordan Clarkson's that 6th guy. 2 years ago, it was George Niang. This past season, it was Joe Ingles.
Yeah.
And then he tore his knee, and then he got moved, and they never backfilled that. So if you're Quin Snyder, there's considerable frustration around that, I think.
Yeah.
And justifiably so.
Well, and I think the trouble is that Quinn knows what Donovan can be, provided he has people around him on the floor. And I think that's the hard part. Quinn thinks they can go a lot farther than they've been. But look, again, the power dynamic at play is this is not unique to the Jazz. I mean, this is a conversation that happens in every organization. And I think the thing that a guy like Quin Snyder wants is the ability to say, hey, I'm tired of fighting the Dallas Mavericks with one hand tied behind my back. Give me something. Go out and get a player that can actually do something for me coming off the bench outside of Jordan Clarkson.
But you know what? I think you touched on something there with Donovan Mitchell that I think is really important.
Yeah.
Quin Snyder's got to become more of a disciplinarian with Donovan Mitchell is a good example of this. You can't be a turnstile on defense.
Yeah.
You cannot, in my opinion, continue to turn the ball over in the paint. I think you have to put the onus on Donovan Mitchell to be a better player.
Yeah.
To be a better all-around player. And furthermore, what I'll say is, I think if you're Quin Snyder, you have to be much more of a disciplinarian on a guy like Royce O'Neale. Royce has got to be a better player in this setup. But isn't that the perfect example? If we're talking about Royce O'Neale having to be more of a leverage player, you're fucked from the beginning.
Well,
excuse my French, but you're in trouble from the beginning.
Yeah, and this speaks to the history of the last 5 years and why you're in this position. And
yes.
There's this raging excitement in the fan base about open tryouts, and because they found Royce O'Neale in open tryouts. And here's
so ridiculous.
My thing with that whole situation is I just can't get down with the idea that tryouts replace the NBA draft. The only reason that there's a lot of conversation about these tryouts is because the Utah Jazz don't have picks in this NBA draft, and they're going to have to make a trade to acquire picks if that is indeed what they're looking for. But let's not make this assertion that these open tryouts somehow replace the D1 grade A best talent in the country guys that are in the NBA draft in the top 10 picks for a reason. And that's why I say, yeah, Royce O'Neale's had a great career for who he is and the contributions he provides to an NBA team. But let's not sit here and say that you're going to find the next Donovan Mitchell in open tryouts. This isn't some Pixar movie, bro. Like, you're not just going to find some diamond in the rough guy. And by the way, my other problem with the tryout thing is, even if you did find a diamond in the rough guy, you've been completely incompetent at developing players.
But that's hitting the nail on the head. And I would just ask you, did the Phoenix Suns find guys at open tryouts? Have the Boston Celtics found guys at open tryouts? Have the Golden State Warriors, have the Milwaukee Bucks, have the LA Lakers, have the LA Clippers, have the Dallas Mavericks, all the top teams in the Western Conference? Did Memphis find Ja Morant at an open tryout? Did they find Desmond Bane at an open tryout? If you are signing guys at open tryouts, you're not winning anything. The problem with this team, and again, I'll just be bluntly honest about it, and you might not like this as a Jazz fan, but the truth be told, which is what we do on this show every single day, the problem with this team is the draft has yielded nothing.
Keep it real.
In all honesty, the draft is yielded nothing. And again, I'm not trying to poke the bear. Devin Booker's wearing a Sun sweater today, not a Jazz uniform.
Yeah.
Right? Like Devin Booker is the perfect example of this. Rodney Hood is the perfect example of this. Dante Exum is the perfect example of this.
Yes.
Udoka Azubuike is the perfect example of this. Guys that this team has historically drafted, and again, I understand Dennis is the guy that did all these moves, and he's not here anymore, but you're paying the sins of the past.
Yes.
That's what you're doing right now. And so when you talk about signing guys in open tryouts, let that go. Because if you're an NBA club signing guys out of open tryouts, you're one of two things. You're lazy or you're not very good at talent evaluation.
Yeah.
Which one is it? And I would say Dennis Lindsey is never going to be accused of being lazy. He just wasn't very good at drafting players.
Yeah.
And so now you wind up in situations where arguably the best guy that you got out of the draft was through a trade with Trey Lyles, who you thought was going to be the end of the world. Now, thankfully, you spun him into Donovan Mitchell. So now you're all ready. Like I see tweets every day. I get DMs every day about, no D Donovan Mitchell. You're already willing to cash out on Donovan Mitchell when you don't know what his ceiling is. But he's better than we've seen this past year, right? You got to be better than that. You can't be sitting here talking about, well, we're going to trade this guy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you want to build around Rudy Gobert then? Because Rudy Gobert is arguably, in the Dennis Lindsey era, he's probably the best player that you got out of that era.
And equally the biggest mistake you made.
I mean, it is what it is.
It's incredible.
So my point in all of this is you can't keep making the same mistake over and over and over again, because that's what bad teams do. Mm-hmm. It's what the Knicks do. It's what historically the Nets had been doing when they were in New Jersey. They get a new owner, he spends money, and they start going to Eastern Conference Finals.
It's what the Suns did.
Right? It's what the Suns did until they didn't. They got a young, hip general manager. They got one of the best available head coaches.
Their owner got the F out of the way.
And I'm telling you, they drafted well. The Golden State Warriors why are the Golden State Warriors in the finals? Clay, Steph, and Dre. That's why they're in the NBA Finals. Jordan Poole, Kuminga. Like, the list is endless of guys that they are their guys.
But it all centers around the draft. And I think, the Warriors and the Suns to a lesser extent, but I think the Warriors are the blueprint. And what I wouldn't, and again, the Jazz aren't in a position right here today, but I think, what I would love to see mentality-wise, what I'd love to see them do is approach the draft that way. Like, what really screams out to me about the Dennis Lindsey era is the scouting was terrible. Because you brought up Ja Morant. Where did they find Ja Morant? Well, yeah, he was the number 2 overall pick in the draft, but where do you think he got discovered?
The Memphis Grizzlies were at Murray State. And the stories about Ja Morant, like, I look at the Devin Booker pick. It makes no sense. The Dante Exum pick makes no sense here today. It still makes no sense.
Yeah.
That guy's not an NBA player. Look,
And again, we shouldn't be crucifying these guys for that, by the way.
And
that
I don't want to, but
said.
you know what? I also don't want to keep going back.
Yeah.
You have a new owner. And this is why I say, and I know I got a ton of heat from this from Jazz fans when I said this. Ryan Smith needs a win. Ryan Smith needs a move that's an unequivocal win. I keep hearing about uniforms. We keep hearing about tryout players. Are the Lakers or Celtics or Warriors or any of these other teams that have made significant moves over the last 3 years, are they worried about their uniforms? Are they worried about open tryouts?
No.
They're not.
Never.
Ryan Smith is, and I don't believe it's true. I don't believe it's true. Let me say again, I don't believe it's true. If Ryan Smith is focused on keeping Rudy and Don so he has 2 guys in the All-Star game, the problem's a lot deeper than 2 guys in the All-Star game. Ryan Smith needs a win. It's time to stop talking about being a billionaire and how cool his story is. It's time to start winning games. But I also am here to tell you, he's in the learning curve right now. Why is Danny Ainge here? Oh, they're friends and BYU. No, Danny Ainge is here because Ryan Smith is one thing. Man, he's intelligent.
Yeah.
Ryan Smith is really smart.
Facts.
He knows what he doesn't know.
Yeah.
So he's bringing in a guy who knows what he doesn't know. And that's why he's here. And that's why Dwayne Wade's here.
And Danny Ainge we trust.
Yeah. I mean, you have to.
That's the position you're in as a Jazz fan. I mean, literally, like that's where it's at right now. And again, I agree with you. At some point, you have to stop going back. But the past is still haunting you today. And that's why everyone still talks about it. And that's why I agree. Damn if this front office doesn't need a win right now. Like, you need to sort of make that first move that, like, defines this front office team's tenure, like the beginning of their time.
Look at the move to get Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah, it's a great move. It's an absolutely savage move.
If you look at the D'Angelo Russell, Andrew Wiggins, like, you look at how the Boston Celtics are in the NBA Finals right now because they didn't trade Jaylen Brown and they didn't trade Marcus Smart. Right? You look at Andrew Wiggins. The Warriors were terrible, but they had the balls to go and make a big trade. As a fan base, we have got to stop talking about open tryouts. Like, I cannot tell you the lunacy of that statement. And I know I saw the tweets. Jake yesterday is texting me like, "Can you believe this?" Like, do you know how bad it? As a fan base, I love Jazz fans. You're so passionate. But, bro, you got to step out of the minor leagues. You got to raise the bar here.
Yeah. You
got to stop talking about open tryouts and Royce O'Neale. That's what drives me crazy. All right, let's get some of your thoughts in here because it just you just can't keep doing it. I'm telling you guys, you've got to raise the bar.
Yeah.
You've got to raise the bar. You have to. All right, let's go back to the top. James Knight, my man, what's up? Where is my 4X gold? James, we're talking to you. Where's my 4X gold, man? Summer ale,
Damn, that is such good beer.
It's winter in Australia. And Australia, mate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where's my beer?
Catch me outside. How about that?
James, my guy. I love you, dude. I'm so glad you're here today, James. Thanks for showing up. Rec 1. My guy, where you been? Rec 1, what's up? Good to see you. Jordan A. Morning, guys. Jordan A. Good morning to you.
Hello.
I slept like 9.5 hours last night.
And you feel great. It's amazing,
I had a migraine. My poor wife. My wife deserves a medal because just on the regular, I am not the easiest guy to be married to. But last night, like, she comes up from, I had an odd day yesterday. I had a bunch of business stuff I had to deal with. And, so I'm just working with business stuff. She finishes work around 6. She comes upstairs and I'm on the couch with like this crazy headache and
Spinal.
Yeah, she's like trying to do this and that and dinner and the A word goes off. Don't forget to take the trash out, fat ass. And so then we got
it became personal with me.
Then we got to take the trash out and my wife, I was crabby. and she deserves a medal. And when she comes down here, hopefully she comes down here today. I'll tell her that because she does
I'm gonna do
deserve
that.
a medal. Yeah. Del Hargis, what's up? We're here for the Monty bomb. Okay, Del. I appreciate that. Tanner, good morning to you. Did you get the car back yet? He did. Oh, hey, yeah, another Karen Montemayor story coming up later. Not really. I handled myself very well.
Karen Montemayor.
The Jeep dealer, shut up, Jake.
Me?
You shut your mouth. You shut your mouth.
So
There's
great.
a Jeep story coming out.
Yeah.
Neville93 says, morning, what are you guys eating for breakfast today? I haven't eaten yet.
Man.
I'm hoping my wife makes oats. My wife's a saint. She makes me oats every day, and she makes these apple oats. They're so good. Yeah, well, foam poles, baby. Giggity says, good morning. Jeremy Bolton says, sup, what's up, sup? Tanner, personally letting Quinn go would be a mistake. He's not perfect, but he's not the Jazz main problem. I hope he stays.
Well, and he'd be highly coveted,
Well,
too.
and I think Quin Snyder's an elite NBA head coach.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times where your wife's no longer hot because she's your wife and you see her every day.
Right.
But the dude down the street thinks she's a smoke show. And that's where you're at with Quin Snyder.
Mm-hmm.
Quin Snyder, the Jazz fans, I think there's a lot of Jazz fans who are frustrated with Quinn. But so you don't understand just how good of a head coach he is.
Man, I hope Danny Ainge performs, dude.
Me too.
Please.
James Knight says, mark my words, R.C. Buford wants Snyder to replace Pop at the Spurs. I would agree with that,
Oh, I'm
James.
sure he does.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like I agree. Like, why wouldn't you want Quinn to replace your head coach? Like, again, even like, not that the Charlotte Hornets are going after Quin Snyder, but they're in a head coaching thing, and that D'Antoni's in the running, and so they've been looking at guys, and you can't.
Wait,
tell
are you
me,
saying that James Borrego is no Quin Snyder?
What?
Okay. So that's how it's gonna be.
Yeah, no offense to good old James Borrego, but I just think that Quinn, and this is the thing with the whole narrative that Quinn would be happy to sit out the duration of his contract if it doesn't work out with the Jazz, because he knows he'd be coveted, and he also knows it's been a stressful couple of years with the bubble and this team not performing, and Don being unhappy on some level with them not being able to get to that next level. Like, it's been a stressful run for Quin Snyder. So that's why I say he would be in high demand. He would get paid. And that's why I think in this situation, he has the leverage, because he doesn't necessarily need the Jazz, but he wants to be here.
Yep, I agree with that. Rudy Sanchez says, morning, fellas. What's up, Rudy? Always good to see you. Ramsey's 10 SA says you can't let go of Quinn. He holds the team together, and not just coaching-wise. Tony also reported that. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think Quin Snyder is a lot more than a head basketball coach. I will tell you that. Ken Williams, good morning to you. He says Quinn don't play his bench anyways, so why does it matter who we get or who he gets? But who on his bench deserved more minutes?
Yeah, but look,
especially in the playoffs.
We've had that conversation a million times. I mean, with all due respect, like, his bench he didn't really have a bench. Like, I am somebody who definitely agrees with the narrative that Jared Butler should have got way more minutes, and he was completely mishandled. I 100%.
And not all of that is on Quin Snyder.
It's not all on Quinn, but I think that Quinn's unwillingness to play young guys comes back to get him in certain situations. Again, it's an unfair comparison to compare the Jazz to the Warriors and what Steve Kerr's done with the Warriors. It's unfair. But in logic, in thought process, I do think it's fair on some level. The reason the Warriors have so much depth is because guys like Kuminga, guys like Wiseman, guys like Jordan Poole, they got a ton of minutes. They developed those guys.
But they were also terrible.
Yeah.
So it was okay for James Wiseman to play a lot of minutes. It was okay for Jordan Poole to play a lot of minutes.
But how do you find that balance? Because you can't honestly tell me that Quin Snyder in the front office, they may have rolled out at the beginning of the season that they were going to run it back, and that's why they signed Mike. But I just don't get down with the idea that you looked at that roster and you said, yeah, we're going to go out and beat the Warriors and the Suns and the Maverick. Like, I just don't get down with that. I don't. Like, I don't think they truly in their heart of hearts believe that.
Brandon Whitesides, good morning to you, my friend. He says, Snyder's biggest problem is babying Don. Lack of accountability for his lack of defense and his extreme feelings. If a 3-time defensive player called out a player like Kobe, does it hurt his feelings? Well, here's the problem, though.
Yeah.
Here's the problem, though. Rudy also needs more, and your word is accountability. Rudy Gobert's pick and roll defense is horrendous. Horrendous. You go back no further than that Houston game. And again, I will just say, You're putting Rudy Gobert in situations he's not built for.
Yeah.
But what choice do you have? Because you don't have depth. You don't have a do you understand that this roster lacks a true power forward? You understand that. You don't have a Marquise Morris. You don't have, I mean, think of the best power forwards in the NBA. You don't have an Aaron Gordon. You don't have guys that are built like LeBron and have LeBron's mobility or can guard the corner and sag to the paint. You're asking Rudy Gobert to guard Terrence Mann or whoever's in the corner.
Rajon Rondo.
You're asking him to switch on to the Luka Doncic's of the world. Rudy's going to make a play 1 out of every 15 to 20 possessions there. And then you're going to turn around and blame him for that as a fan base. But what I'm telling you is blame Justin Zanuck, and before that, blame Dennis Lindsey, because they're the ones who are at fault, not Rudy Gobert and not Quin Snyder. You haven't built depth on this team. And Hassan Whiteside brought some positivity to the bench. No doubt about it. But the guy is a pain in the ass, and he doesn't show up on a nightly basis. And then Udoka Azubuike just is not an NBA athlete at this point.
Yeah.
He just isn't. And so you lack a true power forward on this team. Who are you playing at power forward? Bojan Bogdanovic. And we've gone over this. It's not even that he's too small. He can't move. Look at the situations where you have Rudy Gobert and Bojan Bogdanovic on the same side of the floor. And how many teams this year manipulated the Jazz into an ISO situation with Rudy and Bojan is his help?
Yeah.
That's a disaster if you're the Utah Jazz. Look at how many times Rudy and Bojan had to make a choice between the top of, the top of the arc and guarding somebody in the corner. And they miscommunicated on it repeatedly. Is that Quin Snyder's fault? It's not. It's not. You don't have a power forward of any ability on this roster.
Yeah.
What does that do to Rudy Gobert? It damages Rudy Gobert. It makes him less effective. Anytime Rudy Gobert doesn't have a foot in the paint, it's a problem. It's a problem for the Jazz because he cannot be asked to guard perimeter players. It's not right. It's not fair. And frankly, it does not put you in a position to win that game.
And frankly, if I'm being honest, I'm tired of having that conversation. Like, how many times are we going to talk about that you're asking Rudy to do too much?
And frankly, babying Don might be the right way to put that, Brandon. You're not wrong about that.
Yeah, I think the issue is that Don, the thing with Kobe, that comparison that he made, the difference is that Kobe put you so far over the top, he was winning games for you. Don's not doing that.
And Kobe was an elite defender later in his career. And again, I would point out, and I just want to point this out, that I covered Kobe from the moment he missed all those threes against the Jazz in the playoffs, all the way through his championship run with Shaq and after.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant evolved on a minute-to-minute basis. The minute that he shot those air balls against the Jazz, he was a much better player. And we got to stop comparing people to Kobe and Mike because those guys were just built different.
Yeah.
Those guys just were built different. I think Don is of that mindset. Do you understand that Donovan Mitchell right now and a couple other guys flew their trainers to an island so they could train in isolation and build their bodies? And Donovan Mitchell, David Alexander, who is Donovan Mitchell's trainer, put up a video yesterday of Donovan Mitchell and David Alexander on a boat in the water. And people are like, oh, you're a lazy ass. Why are you on a boat? You should be in the gym. Well, do you know what he was doing on the boat? He was going to another island where they have a gym so he could play pickup. Donovan Mitchell is on an island training, renting a boat, going to another island where there's a gym and he can play pickup.
Yeah.
So don't tell me that Donovan Mitchell doesn't work hard or he doesn't want it or he's doing exactly what you hope he will be doing.
Yeah.
He is living every day right now for the next week or so with his physical trainer. The same guy that LeBron pays, the same guy that D Wade paid. That's who Donovan Mitchell's trainer is. Don's doing it right.
Yeah.
Don is doing it right. We're less than a month away from the Black Ops runs in Brooklyn. And you're going to see Donovan Mitchell there. I'm telling you now, Donovan Mitchell is not your problem. Roster construction is your problem on this team. Ken Williams says, Donnie ruined this team with his BLM bullcrap. No, he didn't. No, he did
No,
not.
he didn't.
No, he did not. That's
No.
it. And Ken, I think you're newer to our show. With all due respect, I just think that is a short-sighted, ridiculous take.
Yeah.
Ruined this team with his BLM crap. So all the other guys who were wearing that on the back of their jersey in the bubble, after the bubble, you side with the community that was upset then that they were giving scholarships to underprivileged and people without opportunity. That's just what I'm surmising. That's, Ken, I don't know you and you don't know me. That's a ridiculous take. That's a ridiculous take. James Knight says, that's BS, Ken, thank you. Anton Galabov says, I hope not. Just trade the prima Don. Maybe trading Don's the right thing to do. They're not going to do it. They're not. And I will again reiterate, I have been told 100 times.
Repeatedly.
It's ad nauseum. Since December, I have been told that Donovan Mitchell and ownership and management, Ryan Smith, Danny Ainge, have all told Donovan Mitchell point blank, we're going to build this team around you. They recognize that the team is currently built around Rudy Gobert, and that's a mistake, and they cannot win that way. They are going to remake this roster around Donovan Mitchell to play to his strengths.
Yeah.
Make or break time for Don. It's make or break time for Don, period. That it is what it is. James Knight says, the year Clarkson won the Sixth Man Award, many argued that award was Joe's, so matter of opinion, I guess. Yeah, matter of opinion. Absolutely. Eric C. says, morning, Monty Town. Eric C., good to see you. Tanner says, morning, Eric C. Ken Williams says, James, really look at his defense. It's terrible. Was TGE BLM good for the team? Yeah, it was. Absolutely, it was. The Black Lives Matter movement brought this Jazz locker room together. It did not separate them in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And
I would tell you it brought the league together, too.
Yeah, I would agree. It absolutely was 100% good for the NBA and its community. No doubt about that. Because I'm telling you now, Black Lives Matter, you don't have to agree with it, but it is factually accurate. I don't want to get into it.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Don't go down the rabbit hole.
Tanner says, facts, Monty, the Jazz probably have one of the worst draft track records in the NBA, without question.
Yeah, and you're paying the price now.
Tanner also says, you spun him into Donovan Mitchell. That's funny you say that, Monty, because Don's nickname is Spider Mitchell. Truth. James Knight says, it's going to be unbearable listening to Golden State slurping over the next couple of weeks. Ken says, I would keep Rudy, build around him. They're already built around Rudy.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Rudy Gobert there is the center of this team, and it's why they have the issues they have. Whoa, huge comment dump. Jeremy Bolton says, will the NBA ever see another Kobe, Michael, or Caruso with that incredible mentality? I don't think so. I think Alex Caruso is the last of his breed. Calvin Howard says, I tried to say it with a straight face, Jeremy. I tried to say it with a straight face, and I could not.